is a little bit different compared to my other shows. My shows so far have been a little bit of show you a pretty picture of an animal, talk about it a little bit, or talk about an area of the world, get you prepared. This one is addressing something that we've been missing this entire cruise. And that to me is this, the heart of nature, the heart of science, really the heart of why I am here on board this ship, as opposed to still being a teacher in Red Deer, Alberta, teaching grade 9 through 12 science. The connection, the heart of things, is a little bit of a sticky wicket to talk about, a little bit of a controversial topic to teach, in that I promised you that I wouldn't be political up on the stage, and I've tried my best not to be. There's a few jokes I tease, but generally speaking, I design my shows to include everybody. I promised that I wouldn't be somebody who would be a little bit hippie, healy-feely, kumbaya. And this show gets a little bit hippie, healy-feely, kumbaya. So, as such, it is not for everyone. If you find that this show, by about 5 minutes into it, seems like a waste of your time, I would not at all be offended if you decided you'd rather go and play progressive trivia or bingo or whatever else is going on in the pattern. I'm sure they showed up and started their show on time. But for those of you that are interested in this sort of stuff, or interested in the connections between things in the environment, both biotic and abiotic, stick around, food for thought. At the end of this, you may think about things differently. It may strike you even on your flight home, whether that's in a few days, a few weeks, or a month. Some of the things that I'm going to talk about, we discovered as children when we were playing in puddles or trying to find stones that were shiny along the riverbank with our parents when they were teaching us how to fish, or even when we were watching TV shows or movies like Bambi or Happy Feet, that penguin show. So again, see if you like it. I hope you do. As usual, please continue showing me your photos. I love that sort of stuff. We've had some amazing folks on the Facebook groups sharing things that they discover sometimes early in the morning. I was up early for breakfast, as I usually do, and was seeing posts about folks that have been up since sunrise at the front of the ship. If you're one of those birders, good on you. That's wonderful. We've been seeing whales and dolphins today already, quite a few humpback whales, and I believe they're Commerson's dolphins, sort of little black dorsal fins but white bodies to them, kind of interesting thing. If you have not seen a whale yet, it is very important that you seize the opportunity that is today and spend some time watching the water. 5 minutes is all it really takes. I cannot guarantee you'll see a whale in that 5 minutes, but you will see something. Have you had a chance to let your eyes adjust to watching the water? Have you had a chance to start staring out there where not every wave, every bird, every stick looks like a whale? If you haven't, the next time you're at the water, whether it's the coast or on a ship or whatever it is, do that. It's well worth the adjustment, well worth the investment of time. Okay. Again, with this show, I want to address the thing that we're missing, right? Because we've talked about clouds. People really like that cloud show. Have you been looking at clouds to see the faces and the creatures, that kind of stuff? It's fun stuff. The question I get a lot is, what are those called? Those lenticular. Think of your glasses, lenses, lenticular, right? We talked about whales. That was one of my first shows. Whale behavior and biology, that sort of stuff. The cloud thing was an interesting one because I started to express my favorites. My favorite, that's that rainbow lenticular. We saw one on this cruise. It was in 2 stops ago, our second Peruvian stop. There was folks that went over to see the Nazca lines and things like that. Apparently up at the end of the day when they were flying back, they saw one of these rainbow lenticulars. Fantastic stuff. For me, it's interesting, I interact with people in different spots. I have what I call my nature groupies, right? Folks that I see on a regular basis at my shows, but I also have people that have no idea that I'm the naturalist, that only see me over breakfast or lunch or over red jello. And I just happen to be the guy that knows a lot about whales or knows a lot about birds. And it's funny because I try to be authentic on stage. I had a professor of mine one time who said that the worst thing you can do is fake enthusiasm. Because if I'm up on stage and I'm faking enthusiasm, and you folks are smart enough to smell that stuff from a mile away, it ruins anything that you enjoy about the topic, right? So if I'm faking enthusiasm about whales, if I'm sort of secretly a bird person, imagine that, anything that you experience with me looking for whales seems like a sales job. Like I was trying to sell you a liquor package or an internet package or something silly like that, right? So when I'm sitting there in the morning or in the afternoon rather, and I'm hunting for the red jello that's first presented of the day, and I'm making jokes about that, that stuff is real. And I think when it comes to an interest in the environment, and the environment has become this political word, but an interest in being outside, into landforms, into the cycles of the year, be authentic. If there's something about it that you really enjoy, whatever it is, lean into that feeling. If there's something about it you don't care about, I am not a facts and figures stats guy. I don't need to know what the peak flow rate is of a creek to stand there and understand when it rains, the level goes up. I don't need to know the mass outflow cubic meters increase to appreciate that sort of stuff. Some people are, right? We have some engineering type folks that like that sort of stuff. Lean into that sort of stuff. Embrace the version of heart that you are. So, with that again, I warn you, this is the most controversial show that I do. Every time I deliver this show, somebody excuses themselves and walks out. And again, it's no skin off my nose. Your time is valuable. If you take what the average price is of a cruise here, divide it by the, 18 days you're on board, divide that by 24 hours and 60 minutes, you're paying about 35 cents a minute to be here. And that's valuable. That used to be a phone call back in the day. And with that said, this is entirely my fault. Okay, this show. So if you do not like this, please do not let that reflect poorly upon your opinion of Princess. This is me only. If you like this show, it's the product of the fellas back here that are doing my sound. Alex, our schedule guy that phoned me at 10:02 saying, "Where the hell are you?" My teachers who were good to me through the years, my mom who taught me about science, all of this sort of stuff. I take none of the blame if you enjoy this. So, let us begin. Big breath. A lot of connection in life starts with breath. A lot of it starts with that moment where you're sitting on a bench in a park and you put the cell phone down. You let that little voice in your head, the to-do list, the honey-do list guy, in your head, stop listing what you should be doing and you start just doing, right? You start looking around. You start noticing things around you. And the things that go past you in that moment of just experiencing phenomenological being, that feeling is called sonder. You have it here with folks that you've made some friends with, whether it's short-term friends or long-term friends. You all flew to Los Angeles, or lived in Los Angeles anyway, drove there, waited in line at the LA terminal, got on board the ship, waited until it was sail away time, noticed that we were 29 minutes late, and looked down and saw some chubby red-headed Canadian running with his luggage back and forth, loading. Second time I've been late on this cruise. The first time was that first day. I was 29 minutes late to get on board. I've learned a lot about LA traffic on this cruise, let me tell you what. But that randomness of the world, that connection with things that you never thought would be significant, that feeling is called sonder. And what's really cool is that that relationship doesn't just apply to you and other human beings, it applies to you and places, times, creatures. It's very cool. Sonder is the word. That's a rare word I'm going to gift you awareness of. Take it home with you, share it around. It was given to me one Christmas in one of those I don't love you, but you're my brother-in-law desk calendars, word of the day kind of ones. And when I hit the word, it was June or something like that of the year. I had to sit down. I had to think about this, the type of relationships that we have where all of a sudden it just matters. You just connect to it in a way that hits you right down to your toes. So sonder is the word. So when I began to learn about the natural world, it was probably similar to the way that you began about the natural world, right? Learning about creatures, names, what they did, right? We started with curiosity, we started with joy, and this is how, as a species, humans did this. You can go back to Aristotle. Aristotle decided that everything in the world had a job, right? Birds had bird-like jobs, snakes had snake-like jobs, fish had swimmy jobs. Politicians were still trying to figure out, but it's okay. It's okay. It's coming along, right? One person laughed at the joke. We're doing better than I did 5 minutes ago, okay? If you progress from Aristotle some 2,000 years ago to about the 1750s, 1760s, to a guy named Baron George Dagobert Cuvier. Cuvier is a name you may remember from around here, and from anatomy. He was a French comparative anatomist. He extended Aristotle's ideas from the entire organism to parts of the organism. A bird's wing has a unique thing to it that a deer's leg doesn't have, right? Similar structures in the limbs, but there's a business of flying that is unique to the wing. You go even further, about 100, 150 years later, to this fella, Charles Robert Darwin. I say Robert is his middle name because that's my first name, with a great beard, who was a ship's naturalist on a ship called the HMS Beagle that sailed through the very waters you're sailing through right now. His ship was as long as our ship is wide. We have a much better buffet, I think. His captain brought him on board not because he cared about the sort of natural things that you'd see and catalog, but because the captain was lonely. The captain before the one that Darwin sailed under was at sea for a very long time, was despondent, actually went ashore and took his own life. And so the Admiralty decided that we need some sort of a companion for the captain. We also need a way to see whether or not this voyage is going to be financially beneficial to us. Let's send this upstart little biology professor who is obsessed with barnacles off to sea, and let's see if we can find any commercially viable plants or anything interesting in the area. Darwin joined the ship and very much had a great bond with the captain, and off they went. And Darwin's entire purpose of being on the Beagle, to him, was to figure out where it was in the great tree of life barnacles existed. Barnacles. We don't know Darwin for barnacles. We know him from evolution, origin of species, descent of man, if you're a nerd about it. But nobody talks about barnacles. And in Darwin's journals, he starts out very enthusiastically leaving England. They made their way across the Atlantic, darted right down to what is now Buenos Aires, worked their way around, came up the other way. In fact, they went through a series of channels to avoid Cape Horn. They didn't want to go around Cape Horn by sail. They went through what is now known as the Beagle Channel. And Darwin enthusiastically woke the captain up. Please drop anchor, stop the ship. The captain was concerned, what's wrong? Just do it, just stop. They dropped anchor, they stopped the ship. So that Darwin could set up his easel and do a quick little watercolor sketch of the glaciers. He was that much of a nature nerd. He wanted to record the specific blue color of the nerdy little glaciers that he saw. And for those that are staying on board for next cruise, we're going through the Beagle Channel, and I'll be on the mic up on the bridge early in the morning at about 6:30 talking about these glaciers and having this little geeky Darwin moment. For those that are heading off, oftentimes if you're flying directly to the east, so if you're headed back to Europe, if you're going to Buenos Aires and over, you can see Darwin's, there's 5 of them, 5 little glaciers, and the Germanche glacier that's known now is the one that he did the painting of. But Darwin improved upon Cuvier in that he said it isn't just that a bird has a wing, the wing changes from groups of birds to groups of birds. This is he didn't come up with the idea of genetics, that was more of a Mendel and friends kind of thing, but the idea that there were specific traits that within a population could be rewarded with success. Biologically, that reward is you get to have babies. Darwin never said it's the survival of the fittest. He said it's the survival of those that could pass on heritable traits. From his view, the entire purpose of biology is to have progeny. Which is interesting because in our species, as is the same thing in some dolphin species, elephants, some of the greater primates, we live well beyond we're able to have kids. Menopause is something that's rare in the natural world. So if the whole point of biology is to breed, if you stop breeding, what good are you? Are you just taking up space? Well, no. If you look at the species that have their females go through menopause, right? They're the species that have the biggest frontal lobes, that have language, cultural pass down. The purpose of staying alive after breeding is cultural teaching. Now, men can breed right until the day they die, which makes me wonder, is that all we're good for? You know what I mean? But isn't that a neat thing? That biologically, it is so important for us to pass down culture, language, teachings, that we've encoded into our DNA life after breeding. That's a Darwin idea. But this is sort of a classical, formal view of biology, of the way we interact with the world. Between these three, you add in Linnaeus, you add in some others, we get the Latin nomenclature, naming of creatures, the tree of life. And now we're changing the tree of life slightly because we're using genetics to compare species. I was talking to one of the bird nerds on board, and I learned that the wandering albatross, which to me is the king of all albatross, is no longer known as the wandering albatross. They've split the species into 4 different subtypes. In the bird world, there's either lumpers or there's splitters. Either you take a bunch of birds that look the same and they become one species, or you split them. Well, now that DNA stuff has come out in great amounts, they're doing DNA testing on birds. And so now we can figure out genetically which birds are related, which ones aren't. And just because 2 birds look the same, cover the same terrain, doesn't mean they are the same. So it's amazing stuff. But I'll bet you for the majority of you, you just go outside and you look at creatures. And some of them you identify with. Some of them you find interesting and enthralling. Like this one. This is a lovely little fuzzy creature, and its name, according to science, is Spermophilus perii. Did any of you take Latin when you were kids? A few of you, yeah. Do you know what Spermophilus perii means? Most of us don't. Well, Spermophilus means seed lover, and perii means discovered by Perry. There's a scientist whose last name was Perry who discovered it. And so what we have here is Perry's seed lover. So it's named after somebody who sat there for 10 minutes looking at it, noticed it was a bit of a glutton, packing its cheeks, and decided forever to humanity, to the universe, to be known as, oh, that thing likes seeds. I guess I would be, well, my mother discovered me first, I suppose. Patty's Jello lover, that's what my name would be to science. Jellophilus pattii. Now, we don't use the Latin names a lot. In common sort of vernacular, we use common names. And so this is called an Arctic ground squirrel, which is a fine name until you realize it doesn't live above the Arctic Circle, it doesn't burrow in the ground, and it's not even a squirrel. It's a groundhog. It lives in stones in the subarctic environment. This is a creature that's a little fuzzy cute guy from up in Alaska. In this show, I'm going to connect Alaska to Antarctica to show you the extent at which these connections, this sonderous relationship, can go. But for the purposes of sanity, and because I'm still, the blood's about here, it's not quite connected to my brain yet, we're going to use common names, just so you're familiar with stuff. The way that most of you learned about nature was you got up on a Saturday morning at about 8 o'clock, you turned on the TV, right? Remember when TVs were furniture, right? Where you turned them on and went, and you could feel your skin getting suntan because you were too close, right? And you watched a show about this fellow, the Wascally Wabbit, right? Or maybe if you grew up in the 70s, maybe it was these two. And you learned about how one was the pursuer and one was the pursuee. One of the greatest disappointments of my life was when I first went to New Mexico and I finally saw a roadrunner. And it didn't go beep beep. What the hell is that? The kind of behavior is pretty accurate though. Kind of tricksters. For me, my generation, I was born in '82. I grew up watching Warner Brothers. Are you a Pinky and the Brain fan? Yep. The story with Pinky and the Brain is they were little laboratory mice that lived on the Warner Brothers studio in the wall. And one was a genius, the other's insane. And what's funny about that is that the short one there, that's Brain, he was the intelligent one. And so you assume he was the genius. And the other one was Pinky, and he was kind of a daft guy, right? You assumed he was insane. Well, it turns out that as the show goes on, the smart one is the one that tries to blow up the earth and take over. The daft one is the one that inadvertently saves the day. So I think, one is the genius, the other is insane. But it got me thinking as a kid that there were creatures out there that, independent of us humans, had their own life, had their own way of being, that were doing things when we weren't looking. And it turns out that that sort of an idea, Sonder, that they're having relationships that are invisible to us, that we happen across, not everybody thinks that way. Not everybody is interested in the secret lives of beetles or whales or birds or bacteria, or the lives of things like mountain ranges, geological time. How strange is that to talk about a mountain having a life? Some of you came across these sort of ideas in popular media, right? The movie Free Willy came out in 92, 93, something like that. And if you fast forward 10 years later, you can see an uptick in enrollment at universities for marine biology. The 8-year-old kids who 10 years later were 18 going off to university saw this movie, had something inside of them turn on, and they wanted to do this for the rest of your life. Some of you saw The Goonies, or you saw Stand By Me, or any of those great sort of coming-of-age movies growing up. And you decided, oh, nature's cool. Some of you went the other way. Some of you saw this movie, a movie so famous. I need to give you 2 notes of the theme song. Ba-ba. I remember being in Waikiki, in Hawaii, and stepping on a black spiny urchin, and having the tiniest little drop of blood come out the bottom of my foot. And then I was in about this much water and going, ooh, sharks. That's the first thought that came to my mind. I had to get out of the water because the shark is going to swim in. No, it's not. But it's ingrained in us. When Jaws came out, if you fast forward about 10 years, the 8-year-olds who were snuck into the theater were afraid of the ocean. Enrollments in marine biology went down. Isn't that a powerful thing? My mom was a nursing student at the time, and she's in Calgary, Alberta. This is the middle of the prairies. Could not bring herself to have a bath that night. She had to have a shower. Because if she submerged herself in this much water in a bathtub, somehow Bruce the rubber shark, Spielberg shark, would swim up the tubes and bite her in the foot. That's how powerful this stuff is. These connections that we have are powerful. For me growing up, as a kid of the 80s, again, TV was important, so as a Canadian kid, I watched a TV show called The Nature of Things with David Suzuki. I mean, here I am wearing a shirt that says Hockey Night in Canada. That's a Canadian church right there. Right? If you look, there's a TV show called Fred Penner's Playhouse in the bottom right. That was about a fella who was a guy who played a guitar, and as soon as he started playing his guitar, he could talk to forest creatures, and they would tell him things. Right? The forest fire's coming, or the flowers are in bloom, or we're trying to find food, or things like that. We go around the corner, there's a top right corner, there's a fellow named John Acorn, who's eventually a professor of mine. He was the one that said, never fake enthusiasm. His show was called Acorn the Nature Nut. John Acorn, great name to have for a show about nature. This is why I don't have a TV show, because Rob Raincock does not lend itself to a great show name. In 1989, my family moved from Calgary, Alberta to Red Deer, Alberta. My dad got a job as a firefighter paramedic. My mom got a job as a nurse at the local hospital. And we got cable television, which meant I got to see American TV. Ooh. We went from 3 channels to about 12. And so I got to see Lauren Green's Wild America. Do you remember that show? That man had a voice that could sell ice to the Inuit, let me tell you what. And he would describe these faraway places like the savannah of Africa. And it was always something chasing something, either trying to feed off of it or mate with it. And slow motion cheetahs going after gazelles. And I was enthralled. I would spend my mornings watching TV, and I couldn't wait to go outside to see none of these. Right? And then when I became older, I realized that in my interest in nature, there's room for things like wonder and humor. Jack Hanna, I think he's got is it a cheetah or something like that, some sort of a large cat. I remember he used to go on Carson, and he would hand Carson a spider or a snake, and Carson would go, "Ugh," you know? I love that sort of stuff. And I can see in my view of these sort of presenters through television, the seeds of who I would become now. I like to incorporate humor, I like to incorporate wonder, I like to have a TV show, or an episode, or whatever you want to call these shows, for everybody. And then I went off to university. I was lucky enough to go to the University of Alberta, eventually graduating, working for Alberta Provincial Parks. I did a little bit of work for national parks, and where my goal is, if you look at the top left-hand corner there, is the great golden rectangle. Not the golden arches, I spent enough time there. I want to work for National Geographic someday. I'd love to have it before my dad passes away. He's 73. For him to open up an edition of National Geographic and to see my name beside an article and some photos. And I'm this close. So, that's cool. The biggest influence in my life, though, was this lady right here. This is my mom. Right? The beard is her fault. Right? In my family, my dad's side, they're Scottish, and they're, dark hair, very tall, gorgeous looking people. My mom's side, short little stubby Scotch people. And, through her I get the freckles, get the red beard, I get the sense of humor. And I remember my mom, as a kid, taking me outside to go look at the forest, to go look at things like red leaves in the fall. And she took time with me. She didn't just say, this is what this is, matter of fact, end of story. It would be, pick up a red leaf, hand it to me. What do you think is happening? Back in those days, I was known as Robbie, right? What do you think is happening? And a big part of the way that I go about showing you things over this cruise is that way. And it's a funny thing, you don't appreciate how much someone means to you until they're gone. My mom passed away in 22. And a lot of what I do, a lot of the best things about me, are a celebration of that relationship right there. That was the most powerful Saunders relationship in my life. And I hope to repay her for all the kindness she gave to me by sharing this stuff with you. And that's why these shows ring authentically, because this is me. I'm literally sharing with you something that is so precious and sacred that I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I made a lot more money working in the oil field as a geologist. Made a lot more money as a teacher back home in Alberta. I'm doing this job because this is the way that I can travel the world, and I can see amazing things and share them with people. This is what I love. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I will be doing this job until I can't. And then it'll be a pre-recorded version of me, and I'll be sitting there watching it. Yeah. This idea of relationships and authenticity is often around us all the time. Like if you look at the back of your shampoo bottle, this happened to me a couple of years ago. I'm looking at the back of my shampoo bottle and it says, oh, made it of a recycled bottle. Why would I care with my shampoo? Well, the media and marketers have learned that we like the idea of environmental responsibility. They try to sell it to us. But this is not a new idea. This is called a medicine wheel. My uncle is a Cree fella from Saskatchewan originally, came over to Alberta, and married into the family. And in his people, the Cree people, the Plains, the Swampy Cree and the Plains Cree, they talk about this relationship of cycles, of patterns, of ways that are reinforcing, ways that aren't. And perhaps some of you are aware of cycles. When you're a little kid, 15 minutes waiting for something is a forever. When you're in your teens, an hour takes forever. When you're in your 20s or 30s, a year is forever. Most of you are, I'm very good at predicting ladies' ages. I'm going to predict your age exactly. Ready? To the year. Ready? 47. Correct? Yeah. Head right on, right? But you're aware of chunks of time, maybe in 5 years or 10-year chunks now. Maybe you see generational patterns. Be honest, who here thinks millennials are useless? I'm an elder millennial. We are useless. It's amazing. You get on these ships, and when we go down to Antarctica, the Wi-Fi gets really bad, and you see a bunch of people under 30 going like this. And then they get smart and they go like this, as if that makes a difference. It's like, you know, back in the old days when they started having the remote unlocks in your cars and you see people putting it on their head? I'm pretty sure this gives you brain cancer if you do that for long enough, you know? I don't know what you're trying to do, but there's a generational change of the kids who were born in the 80s and onwards, where whether it's because we were afraid to go outside or whether we were just bored to go outside, we didn't go outside. Our parents didn't kick us out after breakfast and then say, wander back when you're hungry at lunch. If not, I'll see you before dark. A lot of you folks had that. You're kind of the Huckleberry Finn generation. Most of you. For the 4 people that have left so far in my show, maybe they weren't. That's okay. There's some good bingo going on somewhere on the show. So back to that little fuzzy fellow there. Remember that Spermophilus parei, the Arctic ground squirrel. I want to give you an example of this sort of Saunders relationship I'm talking about. I want to give you an actual example that you can think about of these linkages, these relationships. Oftentimes these relationships are invisible, right? The way that we look at things in the wild classically is we take it, we put it in isolation, put it on display, stats, figures, that sort of stuff. We don't think about where it lives, what it does on a daily basis, when it gets up in the day, what it eats. So let's start. First thing, eating. I mean, this is a cruise ship. We do eating very well here. It eats something called a Sitka spruce cone. Big Sitka spruce trees. They have these lovely large cones about the size of a papaya, we'll say, big ones. And it'll sit there in the tree and it'll feast on them. And the consequence of having a high fiber diet is that you have lots of droppings. It's called a squirrelmidid. You can tell where the squirrels have been eating down below. There's bits and pieces of the cones. And every 10th or 12th seed, little spruce seed, gets cast down into that fertilizer. So you wind up having Sitka spruce trees growing. And when you have more Sitka spruce trees, that means you have more cones, which means you have more of these little fuzzballs. Now I'm going to use the name Doug to describe this fuzzball because my mother said always include your brothers, and that's my youngest brother, Doug. And he's a pilot, flying squirrel. It makes sense to me. This is our first little Saunders loop, our first little food web, or ecological creche, if you want to get fancy with it. It gets worse. So as this squirrel is eating these cones, producing these trees slowly over time, eventually a forest builds. And a forest is a different creature than a tree. A forest will hold soil down, it'll change moisture levels, it'll change water flow over soil, it'll even slow down climate. It's a phenomenal thing. And in that, the trees tend to survive winter a bit easier. They tend to survive drought a little easier, which means more trees, more cones for this little guy. It's a self-sustaining loop. The more it happens, the easier it is for it to work. It's sort of like for you on the cruise ship. On day one, most of you were lost. The front of the ship looked like the back of the ship. You were just gunning to get back to your room. As soon as that door swung open in your room and you saw the bed was made, you saw that there was a desk, there was a bathroom that you could almost fit inside of, and your luggage was there, you felt relief. And now that you're at the end of this cruise, nearly, we got a couple days left, but you know, your old hat. We can give you name tags now. Some of you are quite happy to give directions on the ship. You know exactly where the good food is, where the buffet is, all that kind of stuff. Right? You've learned that this loop gets easier and more energetically efficient as time goes on. Now, what's interesting about this process is that as the trees get more and more and more sophisticated, other creatures take advantage. Something like the Sitka deer. Little deer will come in, they'll browse on things like blueberries or high bush cranberries, and they'll walk great distances to a different chunk of forest, and they do as deer do best, they poop. And in their poop, their fertilizer enwrapped droppings are little seeds. Again, everything is about feeding or fornicating. Right? They're dropping these seeds, and in this forest you're getting biodiversity. You're getting different creatures, or different plants, for instance, growing at different levels of the forest. The forest becomes healthier. Now with all those little foresty things running around, tasty little foresty Bambi-looking things, you have people that take advantage of it, like this. This is a timber wolf, and for a lot of people, they don't like that. They don't like that fuzzy, cute little baby deer eaten by wolves. Well, that's a part of the ecological system. Something must be there to prevent overpopulation, rampant sickness, things like that. And it's an interesting shepherding of a population. In turn, if the population of deer go down, the population of the wolves go down. And you see this following, this chasing of the populations. A famous example of that would be the jackrabbits and lynx, right? As the jackrabbit population explodes, more lynx can be born, more lynx eat, and the population is overpredated, the population of lynx go down. It's an amazing thing. All of this involves Doug the squirrel, because that little wolf eats him too. So this whole relationship is starting to get pretty complex. And as you further back up, you're looking at the valley now, you can see all these connections, and it looks like I went to Costco and bought a bucket of yellow arrows. It really looks messy. But that's the nature of these Saunders relationships. So let's clean this up a little bit. Let's move it to the side here. Yeah, there we go. Move out to the side. Okay, that's our first, we'll call it a Saunders relationship, right? The big Saunders relationship. It gets even worse. Watch this. So that's somewhere in Alaska. We'll pretend it's near Skagway, Alaska. Well, Doug is successful in his little life, and his missus, Brittany is her name, comes along, and they have two little daughters. They have Sophie and Allison. And Sophie and Allison are taught the ways of being a squirrel, and they go off in the same forest, they spread out, and they themselves have their own little babies, and they propagate through the world, and they all have their own Saunders relationships. This is successful over great distances, over great times. Now it's really getting complicated, because now we're not just talking about a little chunk of the forest, we're talking about not just the forest, we're talking about multiple forests on multiple valleys. We're spreading across the state. Well, it gets even worse, because this system, these little forests add up. Over time, as these forests change the airflow across the valleys, they slow down weather, they slow down wind. Slowed wind means more precipitation. More precipitation up in Alaska means more snowfall. More snowfall means the likelihood of building glaciers increases. When you have glaciers building, they erode rock. When they erode rock, they create stream beds. They create glacial valleys. Glacial valleys and stream beds full of fresh water, full of pea-sized gravel. That is really good for the salmon to come up and lay their eggs in. Mm-hmm. We've connected a squirrel to the salmon? Yeah. It gets even worse, because those salmon are noticed by Uncle Ursa there, the big bear, who waits patiently all winter and all spring and most of the summer, and when the salmon spawn, gorges himself like some of you did that first night on this cruise ship, like I have never seen. It's part of their life cycle. The bears would not exist up there in the way they do now without the salmon. The salmon would not exist without the glaciers and the fresh water and the erosion. That would not exist without the snowfall. The snowfall all the way back to Doug the squirrel. It's kind of like a butterfly effect, right? Well, when the salmon are doing their life cycle, right, when they first flush out of those streams, they're little tiny little salmon like this. The whales pick them up, or things the whales eat pick them up. When the salmon are done mating, they die, their bodies break down. As the great artist up there, Ray Troll, would say, spawn till you die. They go into the food system, and the little fish, some of the things that break down those nutrients, are eaten by some of the largest creatures, the whales, right? So now we're involving whales. We're involving land creatures and creatures in the ocean. And throw in the eagles, you have the sky creatures as well. Well, my mother also said, be fair to your brothers, plural. The middle brother is Jimmy, so there's Jimmy the sea otter. He has a suspicious beard like I do. He's a voice actor. We're now really expanding this idea of Sonder, this invisible relationship. And it sounds a little bit frivolous and silly, but this stuff is the core of modern biology, modern ecology. It's no longer about cataloging new species. The vast majority of all the species on the planet have been discovered. It's how they relate to each other. How do we figure out who is eating what, in what way, at what time of the year? And if we as humans do something silly to interfere with that, how do we stop that? Or if there's a way for us to protect things, right? Conservation is important. Now, I like to do a bit of a balance with that. And again, I'm not going to be political, but I think it's a shock to a lot of my tree hugger friends that I'm a huge advocate of hunting. I think hunters are some of the best people out there. They're the first ones to report poachers. They're the first ones to give us scientists information about populations. They're the first one to give us heads up about disease or about how there's sudden changes. All of a sudden there's no deer. What's going on? Well, it turns out that there was, that kind of stuff. I think that there's a lot of people in the environmental field who focus more on the mental part of the word than the environmental part of the world. The environmentalist movement should be one about relationships. It should be one where we discover those connections, those invisible connections. But it gets worse. So if I back this up a little bit, we can see that those whales navigate the world. The orca, or the killer whale, and that's a whole show unto its own, don't just live in Alaska. Most of you have seen them in Alaska. That whale right there is not a North Pacific whale. It's not even a Pacific whale. It's an Antarctic whale. 70% of the world's population of killer whales and orcas live on the peninsula of Antarctica. So if you want to know more about Antarctica, make a fist, stick your thumb out. That's the shape of Antarctica. This is the main frozen body. There's the banana belt, the peninsula. We are going there on this ship in a couple weeks. If you're getting off, my condolences, because Antarctica is amazing. Promise me this though, before you go to Antarctica, you go to at least one of Alaska or Greenland. The Iceland route, that kind of stuff, right? Don't go to Antarctica first, because Antarctica ruins those two routes. If you like the ice at Glacier Bay or the Icelandic fjords, they will become nothing to you the first moment you go to Antarctica and you see just how big it is. Imagine a piece of ice 4 or 5 times as tall as the ship, 4 or 5 times as long as the ship, and that's a crumb compared to some of the larger ones. We, depending on the weather and the time of year, go to see an iceberg called A23A. It's 42 miles long and 12 miles wide. On that kind of scale of things, the ice isn't flat. It's a tabular glacier. It looks flat. It's not. It's curved, because over 42 miles, the Earth is noticeably curved. This is a chunk of ice that's floating and moving around that is over the horizon. It has its own weather systems. It's wild stuff. If you look at where those whales go, they're not hunting other fish, other seals. They're hunting penguins. They're penguin killers. Their massive dorsal fin is to give them an idea of where the ice is above them. That's why they have this unusually tall 6-foot dorsal fin. Those are chin-strap penguins, one of my favorites. Those penguins have learned to jump up on the ice to get away from these killer whales. These whales that will stick their faces out and watch them. Imagine something that's 30 tons with a jaw that could easily fit 3 of you inside of it, poking its head out of the ice, looking at you, and giggling. Forget Jaws the shark. It should be Free Willy. That should be a horror movie. Well, there's other creatures up on the ice. Like there's a leopard seal there. And there's a volunteer little chicken McNugget. Right? He's jumped up on the ice. But the little penguin has learned that on the ice, leopard seals can only reach as far as their face can stick out. So they can get within this far from them. What they don't know is that the leopard seals have adapted. They know to keep their necks retracted. So when these penguins get close, all of a sudden, sticks out and they'll grab it, or they'll trick them into jumping up onto ice floes where there's more than one. This is all connected back to the whales, which is then connected all the way back to that little squirrel. So we've gone from Alaska to Antarctica directly. But there's one creature that's missing in this, and this is a creature that is one of the most dangerous, deadly, cruel, miserable creatures out there. And no, I'm not talking about Dodgers fans. Well, sort of I am. Because it's you folks, right? We are part of this system, whether we like it or not. Whether you're actively or passively out there in the forest, tree hugging or whatever you're doing. What's really cool about that, and this is where I depart from a lot of my very political nature nerd friends, is that I see that relationship as reciprocal. Because as much as we affect the environment affects us. Have you not noticed that when you spend a little bit of time watching the ocean, or going for a walk, or spending time watching birds, you feel different? You feel calmer? Perhaps your ability to have conversations with strangers improves. Perhaps you just feel like it's something interesting, it's something to pass time by. We have sonderous relationships all the time, not just with humans, but with places, creatures, ways of being. It's fantastic. I love that sort of stuff. If you understand anything from my shows, other than I make a lot of jokes about red Jell-O, it's that you need to slow down just a touch in life. That life is so much sweeter if you sip the coffee rather than gulping the coffee. Right? You spend 5 minutes looking at the ocean. So, I put Royal Princess, she's Sapphire Princess. That's what you get for being 5 minutes late for your show. I want you to think about your journey here. I want you to think about the story arc that you participated in. And was there a star? Was it seeing a whale? Was it seeing a certain bird? Was it going to a certain port? For some of you, you went and saw the Panama Canal for the first time. For some of you, you snapped spaghetti when you crossed the equator. I'm still waiting for photos to be printed out. That card will be coming hopefully tonight. I'll slip it under your door for those that were part of that. Maybe it was a person. Maybe it was one of the presenters. Maybe it was one of the dancers. Maybe it was, I don't know. What's that?
Sea lions.
Sea lions. There you go. Yeah, the sea lions that were barking at you. And if you get close enough, they stink. They're wonderful creatures, right? Maybe it was your cabin steward. I don't know. When you discover that there's a hero in your story, pay attention to that. Pay attention to the relationships as well. That's my little 2 cents. Okay, so have a big breath again. The hippie stuff is over. No more kumbaya. Okay, we've survived it. Right? When you leave this ship, I want you to take a moment as a favor to me. Find somebody with one of these oval gold badges. Right? Your cabin steward, the bartender, the sound guys, whomever. And I want you to try to develop a little bit of a relationship with them, in that do something more than ask them what part of the Philippines they're from or what part of the ship they work at. A lot of these folks are on longer contracts that are 6 months, 8 months, 12 months. I'm on a 14-month extended contract myself. I don't even know what land looks like anymore. Because, for a lot of folks that are on board, this is their life. And they're sharing it with you. That's how they pay their mortgage, but, understanding that you folks are permanent yet seasonal for them, coming and going as they are in your life, take a moment and connect with them, right? The fellow back there at the bar right now, what was his favorite color rock growing up? Those little conversations, those little sonderous moments, when you seek them out, when you don't ignore them or shy away from them, are wonderful, delicious little treats, like finding a jujube. Right? My favorite candies growing up. Not the ones that are stuck on the couch, but like a little hidden Halloween candy, right? I like that stuff. As always, I invite you to talk to me after the show, ask me questions, show me a photo, tell me a story. If you need me to identify stuff, I know some of you want to meet up with me for photo stuff, or you just want to say hi. I will always have time for you for that sort of stuff, even if I'm late for the show. My apologies, I feel so bad. Haven't done that in a long time. And with that, folks, this is the last of my arc of presentations for this cruise. It has been an absolute pleasure being your ship's naturalist. Today, I plan on spending some time out on deck 7, out here, looking for birds and whales. I have a 2 o'clock meetup at the wheelhouse. We're going to go probably the back of deck 14. I noticed yesterday that a few of you blew away like